Yo, what's up everybody? It's Ted here. Welcome to another Skin Club video. Today's video is going to be focused on not such a positive note. We already did one of those more negative angles a couple weeks ago with the Virtus Pro one. Now, I am doing this one with a bit of a heavy heart because we're going to be talking about a team that I actually have enjoyed watching since pretty much starting to watch Counter-Strike a couple years ago, and a team that has some of the players that I've been a big fan of since I was a teenager, but that is a team that has been struggling quite a lot. So we're gonna take a look at what are the things that we would want to see, or I would want to see change, and what are the things that I think should have changed, and maybe some of the mistakes along the way, and the things that are not going great for that team. The team in question is Team Liquid. We're going to be taking a bit of a deeper look into what has been going on with Liquid in the last couple of months, and the things that have been happening to them lately as of the start of the second season of 2025. So without any further ado, let's get right into it, have a bit of a chit chat, and try and figure out why is Team Liquid actually going through the crisis that they have been in the last couple of months. All right, now we're on HLTV. We're looking at Liquid's profile. The starting point of this entire conversation will be probably for a lot of you reminding that Liquid was one of the few top teams, and when I say a top team, I don't mean top 5, top 10, because they haven't been that performance-wise, but this is probably what they should be, that hasn't actually committed to doing more changes in the player break. Now, we're saying this with the clear conscience that Liquid did make quite a significant change. It's just the fact that they announced that signing right before the start of the major. That was the signing of Shuey, obviously the ex-captain of Mouse, product of the Academy of Mouse as well, Mouse NXT, and grand finalist at the Blast Paris major in 2023 with the side of Gamer Legion. So the reason I want to start this conversation from there is I feel like Liquid did make the right choice with the in-game leader. As much as obviously it will be a little bit different for Shuey from working with people that he's known so much on Mouse, and people on Gamer Legion that were a little bit of a lower caliber, especially back then, and building a team from ground up. I think he's got the experience to build something new. I think he's the right piece to put at the center of that type of a project. And probably for a lot of people, the stocks of Shuey as an IGL did fall throughout the first couple of months of 2025, because obviously he does get removed from Mouse, and then Mouse started having even more success. So it's quite easy to say Shuey wasn't the right man for the job, and he was probably one of the reasons that Mouse wasn't performing. I don't really share that opinion, though. I feel like the fact that things are working out more with Spinks and Brolin doesn't necessarily mean that Shuey was or is per se a bad in-game leader. I don't really feel that way. I still am refusing to forget that Shuey was one of the people that everyone wanted to see over at G2. Some people were even discussing him replacing Karrigan on FaZe at one point in 2024. I still feel like he's an in-game leader that could make life really difficult for the team. On the other side, he's quite good at giving space. He's really good at making his players comfortable, but he's got a really set view of how he wants to approach the game, which probably I feel like might require a little bit more time for him to be able to get on the same page with more experienced guys like Twist, like Nav, that already have a fixated idea on how they want to approach the game. But then again, especially Twist has been versatile enough throughout his entire career for this not to be a problem. Now, Liquid did sign of Shuey, which I thought was a really good choice, because he was initially loaned out. They did lock him in right before the start of the major, and I felt like that was the right moment to do that, especially with all the rebuilds taking place right after that at the start of the new season. That was a good way for Liquid to make sure that they have a really high caliber in-game leader going into the new season. Sadly, this is probably where the good choices start and almost where they end. Now, I say almost because Liquid did make one more change. Obviously, the major didn't go their way. They lost the BO1 to Limvision. They lost the BO1 to the Mongols, and then they got a map off of Mouse, but ultimately lost that series as well, even though they were one round away from actually eliminating Mouse, so they were quite close to doing that. Then fast forward, and before we start talking about the results, we're going to talk a little bit about the other newer signing, and this is Flashy. Now, Flashy is the new head coach of Team Liquid as of a couple weeks ago. Flashy hasn't really had the time to leave his mark on Liquid yet. So when we're talking about negatives and positives, I guess putting everything on the table, just a quick introduction for those of you that don't really know who Flashy is. Flashy is, or was back in the day, a professional Counter-Strike player in the Hungarian scene with plenty experience. He played professional Counter-Strike for 6 years, starting with Volgar, going to Trick, Kick, Orbit. Those are all Hungarian lineups, played on organizations like iNation, and obviously more recently Game Agents, Budapest 5, Salamander, and Budapest 5 again. Played with guys like Coolio, who's the head coach of ex-Navi Junior, now announced Foot Esports, and obviously played with Torji as well, who's the Oper for the side of Mouse. As a coach, 29-year-old Flashy started with Budapest 5 for around half a year in 2020, then went into being a head coach in female Counter-Strike, coach COG Red, ex-COG Red, and then had his, I guess, most notable tenure as a coach on FlyQuest Red for a couple months, but that didn't last long before he got picked up as the assistant coach for the side of Navi. And this is where, or the analyst, of course, and assistant to Blade for the side of Navi. This is where most of you guys know Flashy from, and this is where this picture is from, obviously with the Navi hoodie. Now he did spend 2 years on Nadas Vincier. He played obviously a big role in the fact that Navi was able to become the team of the year last year. They won a major. He was there throughout this entire time. And as much as it's really difficult to actually, I guess, go into details onto what an assistant coach or an analyst is doing necessarily for a team before people go out and say it themselves, what we can work with is the fact that Flashy did stay in Navi for 2 years, and the moment he leaves is when he gets the opportunity to become a head coach for a big organization, meaning Navi probably did keep on finding him useful, right? Blade probably enjoyed working with him. He was staying there for 2 years. Navi had their ups and downs, but strategically, I guess Flashy had the opportunity to learn from maybe the best strategist in the history of this game, right? Which should count for something. Now, the fact that he's worked with Blade for a couple of years doesn't necessarily mean that he's just going to become his copy, right? It doesn't mean that he's going to become the best coach in the world because he's worked with the best coach in the world. It just means that there is some good qualities that Blade saw in Flashy, and he thought he was worth keeping around, right? Whether it be strategical view for the game, which is probably the main thing when you're an assistant or an analyst. You got to be looking at, you're doing a lot of the ante, you're studying other teams, you're watching a whole lot of demos. So, and I guess at times you might have to be a bit of a people's person, right? When you're on a smaller team, but probably not on Navi. So we don't really know how much of the psychological warfare was actually going through Flashy whenever there were problems inside of the team, and how much he had to deal with people and managing people issue. Probably not his job on this team, right? So when we're talking about what he probably got from his tenure in Navi, and again, we're just making educated guesses here. We can't know for sure. But what we saw from when we're talking about what he could have gotten from Navi, that is a really good view of the game. That is a front row seat of one of the best coaches in the history of the game, and a way to study Blade and look at the positives and look at some of the flaws. And this is from an interview that Flashy himself did give to HOTV, the fact that he thinks that he's figured out some of the flaws and some of the mistakes that Blade was doing, and he will try and be a little bit more freed up as an in-game leader. He will try, or as a coach, sorry, he will try and be that type of a guy that has a set structure, but allows people to thrive a little bit more and make their own decisions and have some more space to work within the team, which in his opinion is not always what Blade was going for, right? Then again, we have to have in mind that Blade not always has had the best pieces on Navi, so maybe one of the only logical ways for Navi to win was for everything to be as strict as it was, right? Now Flashy's going over to Liquid, where I feel like that mindset in general, and this is judging by just one interview that he's given, I think that really it aligns really well with the general view of Shui for how the game should be played. Twist as well is one player that has always enjoyed and thrived on teams that are given a lot of freedom to their players. Face Clan being one, obviously, that we have to name, the one that he lifted the Antwerp 2022 major trophy with. So I think in that case, that Flashy ends up really being a head coach that wants to give freedom and wants to make everyone feel comfortable and wants to let people have their room to work with within the server, regardless of, following the plan. I feel like that makes him a right match. Now, you can never know if he's going to be good for the job in the long term. Obviously, you have to give him a little bit of time. He needs to prove himself. The good thing is that he's got past experience as a head coach. He's got experience being the analyst of the best team in the world at one point. And as of right now, he's still at an age where he's a little bit more mature, but he's got a lot to learn, right? He's not 37, 38. He's not in his 40s. He still has a lot of time to learn. And for a coach, being 29 is actually quite young, right? If he wants to be a successful, long-standing coach, he could probably stick around for 10 more years, right? You never know. But in the end of the day, I feel like this is maybe the move that I'm not against. I like it from the side of Liquid. I would much rather see a team like Liquid give an opportunity to someone that's been working hard in the last couple of years in the space, instead of just recycling the same old names that maybe don't want it as much as Flashy does, right? Maybe he's got that extra hunger that older guys are not gonna have, that have been around the tier 1 scene for a while, coaching wise. So I do like that choice. I feel like this is one of the more logical choices that Liquid have made in terms of choosing their coaching staff lately, and they didn't really have too many great opportunities to begin with. I still feel like maybe the only other way that Liquid could have gotten something more out of this transfer window was if they were able to lock in Saw from Heroic, but obviously we all know that he went over to G2. So after Saw, I feel like with Zonic being taken, with Blade being taken, I honestly think that was one of their better opportunities. I don't want to see one of their better options. Sorry, I don't want to say their best, because obviously you could always say that the lack of experience as a head coach of a team like this, and the fact that he hasn't really been a head coach in 2 years could be a factor. And the last time it was in a completely different circuit on a different level of competition. It definitely is a factor. He's never been the one to have to manage guys like Naf, like Twist, like Nerds, even if you will, big game players, Shui as well. So he definitely will need a little bit of time to figure out what type of a coach he wants to be. And this is, I think, the sacrifice that you're willing to make. But other than that, I really feel like this was a good choice from Liquid. You're looking at Chewy, you're looking at Flashy, you're looking at Twist, and you're saying this is a good 3-man core. Now, the reason I'm putting those 3 out there is because I feel like they have been probably the 3 pillars in Liquid, and I'm gonna get to Ultimate. I know he's been playing well. That is all good. The blunder for me, for the side of Liquid, is that regardless of all the poor results that the team registered towards the end of last season, the 0-3 at the major, before that losing at IM Dallas to Aurora and Mouse, I guess beating FaZe was nice. They've been able to get some wins every now and then, but in general, the first half of the year was a complete failure. If you want to talk about Naf, he's posting the worst career performance or the worst annual performance of his career. 0.93 rating for NAF. He's never had an year worse than that. And the only one where he was close was 2015. When or not even 2015 actually. Okay, we're gonna cut that. Okay, continue here. And the last time he had such a strugglesome performance was in 2014 when he was still playing on Denial, and he was even then above the 1 rating mark, right? So you're looking at 2025 NAF, and it's a 0.93 rating, which doesn't necessarily give you a lot of confidence. And even the fact that towards the end of the season, it felt like a sure thing, right? NAF after the major says, I'm probably, my days on Liquid are probably numbered. I'm probably going to be going out. I don't really know if I'm going to be staying on the team. And then they don't make any changes. And that's the weird thing. You bring in a coach who's a really young guy, who's a really inexperienced guy, and you're acting like you're bringing in someone like Zonic or Blade, and this is a single man that could just change everything. And the fact that you have a team like Liquid struggling as much and you are refusing to make further changes, I guess the fact that you bring in Shui is making you believe that, especially if he goes out there and says, I can make this lineup work, believe in some way, but it still felt like you're risking too much when you're deciding not to make any changes. Nerds has been having a strugglesome performance. Twist has been having one of the worst years in his career as well, with the previous one actually being 2020, which was the year before he left Liquid and went over to FaZe Clan. Ultimate, I still am not a massive fan of, even though to be completely blunt, he's been one of the few breaths of fresh air on that Liquid lineup, especially in difficult games. He's been trying his best to step it up. Maybe not the most world-class oper that you can get out there, but in comparison to some of the big stars on the team, he's actually delivering. I still feel like if you are Liquid, and if you have an in-game leader like Shui and guys like Twist, and you want to keep Naf and Nurse, for example, the only way to strengthen up that lineup further is to try and upgrade the Oper. Potentially, if Naf's performance doesn't become any better, I mean, Magisk is benched right now. There's a couple options. I just feel like, as of right now, the fact that Liquid didn't make a change was one of the bigger surprises and maybe one of the bigger mistakes of this off-season. Then the new season starts, and you're seeing a loss in an online game to Sashi in the ESL Pro League Europe close qualifier, which for a lot of people was interpreted as a massive failure, but in the end of the day, you could find the excuse, say that now they're a European team, they need to be playing those qualifiers, they're not used to it, it's online counterstrike. This was just the third online event that Ultimate had played with Liquid. That tells you enough about how used they are to actually playing online and how used they are to playing LAN. So I guess you could say Sashi is not the worst team in the world to lose to. If you're a Liquid, it still is a really painful one, considering Sashi have been struggling in Tier 2 Counter-Strike as well. It definitely isn't a game that they should be losing, but that ends, and you're saying this is the first game after the player break. It's an online matchup against a team they've never played against before. Let's give them a little bit more time. Then Cologne comes in, and Liquid is not that disappointing, right? They took down Pain in a 2-0 fashion, lost a 1-2 best of 3 to FaZe, but it was really competitive, and then we're able to take down FlyQuest in a 2-1 fashion. So you're thinking, okay, there's a little bit of improvement. Maybe there's something about Liquid on there. And Naf was playing great. He came out in the right after the break, and at Cologne said that all of it, he thought he was going out of the team, but every single one of his teammates actually backed him and wanted him to stay, and said that they were believing in him, and he was showing up individually. He was performing better at Cologne. Then obviously the main stage comes in, and they get absolutely trashed by both Mouse and FaZe. But in the end of the day, when you draw the line, I guess Naf was a little bit improved at that event, and they did make the main stage, which was the goal to begin with. But the lack of competition in those two games was, I guess, the worrying part. And then we go forward a little bit, and I feel like today, the 1st of August is when I'm recording this video, was the zenith of Liquid's misery. And the zenith of Liquid's misery was the RES Showdown 2 Blast Premier Rising qualifier, which is essentially the close qualifier for Blast Open London 2025. And I casted this game. For those of you that don't know, I'm also a caster. I don't just do the content here for the video with the videos and the articles. I am a Counter-Strike commentator, and I casted this matchup. And I will say, as much as VP Prodigy did over-exceed expectations for a bunch of kids that don't really have a lot of experience, and their oldest player is 18 years of age, and Triborg, for example, is a 16-year-old, they did play really well. VP Prodigy exceeded expectations, but in the same time, what we did see from Liquid throughout this game was sometimes overzealous plays out of the individuals, lack of cohesion, discombobulation, anything that you could say you shouldn't be seeing out of a team like that playing against a couple youngsters like the Virtus Pro Academy in an event that VP Prodigy can't even get out of, because the main team of Virtus Pro is playing Blast Open London. So VP Prodigy is just playing for the VRS, right? They're just playing for the exposure, just to try and get a couple wins and get a couple points. They're not even going to get the points for potentially winning this qualifier if they do, because they're not going to go into the main event. Now, Liquid did start really slow. Lost Dust2 in what was a tremendously disappointing fashion. Then Mirage comes in, and I'm thinking, okay, everything's back to normal. Naf 17-3, Ultimate 15-6, Twist 12-8. Things look clean. Naf was doing whatever he wanted. Liquid were playing proactive Counter-Strike. They were aware. They were not getting surprised by really structured and well put together but basic plays out of VP Prodigy. Then VP Prodigy started getting overzealous themselves, started going through smokes, going for wild plays. Liquid were there. Liquid were able to punish. They did show that they have the overpower advantage, which should be the case in a game against VP Prodigy. And then we go into that nuke map, and again, it starts being a little bit worrying. But then Liquid wins 6 rounds on the T side in the first half, and you're thinking, well, this is definitely going to be a much better performance on the CT side. Then they lose the pistol, they lose the conversions in the second half, and suddenly they're stuck in a situation where Naf and Twists, and I know the scoreboard doesn't say it, but especially for Twist. For Naf, it kind of does, because he ended the map on 28 and 17, and he was by far their best player on the server. But Naf and Twist on the B-bomb side of Nuke did save them in so many occasions. But the reason I'm saying all of this is for you guys to realize that we're talking about a game between Liquid and VP Prodigy. We're talking about a game between Liquid and the Academy of Virtus Pro that doesn't have a single player who's got more than 30 maps on HLTV on this team. And we're talking as if whether you win the pistol and whether, some of your individual step up is a win condition for a side like Liquid, they should be winning a game like this 10 out of 10 times, right? Obviously, those things matter. Obviously, there was a lot of crazy clutches. There was a lot of good plays out of VP Prodigy, and they probably punched well over their weight. And you can say that Liquid had a little bit of pressure going into that qualifier, especially after losing to Sashi earlier on this season. But it still should be a game that Liquid are winning. And I will not say anything more about this particular game. Obviously, Liquid is out of the qualifier and they can't make it out. What I will do is I will open Twitter and look at a tweet that went out courtesy of Twist right after the game. We're not a team. No words for how we play. 1-2 to VP Academy. Sorry to the fans for the terrible performance in the past weeks. And I feel like that tells you enough. For someone like Twist, as I said, since 2020, he hasn't had that bad of an individual year, and it still doesn't feel like he's the problem on this lineup. I think for him is going to be as disappointing as it gets what his team is going through right now. And even individually, the worrying signs are at the start of the year when Liquid were still struggling, but had a couple occasional wins. Twist was individually performing better. And in the last maybe 2 months, we've seen an even more difficult performance out of Twist. We've seen him struggle individually, which is not usually how things go with this man. And the fact that he's got the incentive, I guess, to go on Twitter and say something like that should be telling you enough about how much belief the team actually has inside, especially when you have one of your more experienced players who's known to be a really obviously a really emotional guy, but and he really does care about what's going on with the team. But especially when you've got someone like that on the back of supposedly adding a new coach that should change a lot, and adding a new in-game leader, going out and tweeting stuff like that just a couple weeks into the season, there's a lot of questions being asked, a lot of eyebrows being raised. And you're thinking, well, if they feel that demotivated just a couple weeks after they did go out and say, we're holding on to this 5-man lineup, adding the new coach will help us out, and we're going to make it work in the second half of 2025, then what are the hopes really? If this is how quickly you've given up on everything. I think Liquid is really going through a crisis right now. And I know we've been saying that for many years, but this is probably the worst state that Liquid has ever been in, honestly. And I'm trying to think about all the worst for moments when Ykinder was on the lineup, when they even had that weird moment when he was the IGO and they had Rainwaker and Patsy come over. This iteration of Liquid right now is probably losing games that even that iteration before would have won. Obviously, there's no way for us to know that, but yeah, I think Liquid has not really taken the right path going into the season. And obviously, it's easy to look at the results and start pointing fingers based on ratings. But the thing is, I really do feel like there has been some logic to some of the signings. You get guys like Nerds, like Twists, like Shui on the team. You get Flashy as the head coach, and you want to give him a little bit of time to work. But things are not planning out right now for Liquid. And sometimes a team like that might need the changes just to freshen things up, right? Sometimes it's like what happened with FaZe bringing in Simple, right? Maybe Brokey wasn't the problem on that FaZe lineup. Maybe there's other people that should be replaced. Sometimes when a team gets too stagnant, you just need to change players because the cohesion's not there anymore. And I'm afraid that I feel like this is what's going on with Liquid right now. I don't really know what's next for the team. Obviously, they're going to be playing the Blast Bounty Season 2, and they're starting their performance, their participation there in a game against Ecstatic, which will take place in a couple of days. I feel like 1 or 2 more losses like this, though, and yeah, Liquid will probably be forced to make somewhat of a move. And I guess the game against Ecstatic, this is a great opportunity for the Danes. And then for Liquid, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel like you lose this game, and then changes are going to be knocking on the door, even though it hasn't even been a month since the start of the season. But yeah, make sure to let me know why you think things are not working out for Liquid. I'd say just maybe a couple wrong decisions, maybe a couple maybe a couple moments of too much faith into something that is long overdue and should have been changed a long time ago. This is the only logical explanation. A lot of frustration within the team, which I think requires some fresh blood and a little bit of that good, nice wind of change, so to speak. But yeah, that's the video on Liquid. Make sure to let me know what you think about it. Of course, in case you're watching this one on YouTube, leave me a comment. In case you're watching this one on SkinClub, you can add me on Twitter and SkinClub and let me know what you think about it. And what do you think Liquid should change going into the next season? For now, this is going to be everything for me. Thank you very much for reading the articles, watching the videos, and doing that for every single other content creator, I guess, on the SkinClub platform. All the broadcast talent, all the people that are writing articles, all the people that are recording videos for you guys to stay entertained. And finally, lastly, shout out to SkinClub as well for making all of this possible. That was everything for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. Stay safe.